Now we enter competency number 3 on establishes and maintains agreements. And I find that this competency is often misunderstood because many individuals think of this as a checkbox. We have done it, let's move on, let's move on. They think of agreements very much like, okay, we've agreed on this, let's go. Now, agreement sometimes is used as contracting. We may use words like goal setting. We may use the words like outcome finding, results focus, solutioning focus. We may use different words to describe agreements. But generally, agreements in the context of professional coaching comes in two general forms. One, it's what I commonly call the formative agreement, which is things like logistical, technological, administrative, finance, planning, projecting macro level. So you have that macro piece of agreements, formative agreement. You also have what I typically call a sessional agreement, where the agreement it's more about what happens in that session. What do we focus on? What do we want to do? How do we want to explore? And the ICF definition for agreements is partnering with client and relevant stakeholders to create clear agreements about coaching relationships, process, plans, and goals. Establishes agreements for the overall coaching engagement as well as those for each coaching session. And some of the competency highlights are this. In fact, there are a few changes or a few slight modification, and one of them being subcompetency number 1 or 3.1. And it says this now: describes one's coaching philosophy clearly, clearly defines what coaching is and is not for potential clients and stakeholders. So now it has this new inclusion of coaching's philosophy. And I like that. I like that a lot because there are different school of thoughts, there are different coaching approaches, different coaching philosophy, or different coaching ideas, frameworks that different coaches really embody. And so we call that your own personal coaching philosophy, whatever we believe in. So, for example, for me, I truly believe in this partnering of co creation or the co created space where it's excogitate, eclectic, where I don't fix you on one process. I first take time to understand, listen deeply to you, and I may approach the conversation using different models or tools and techniques where appropriate. So it's not one fixed frame where you go through A, B, C, D, but rather really listening, being eclectic about the conversation, being curious, and sometimes creating those tools in the moment with you. So 3.1 is describing one's coaching philosophy. I'll have a whole deeper series on what is a coaching philosophy. In fact, in my mastery class at level 3 from MCC level, we spend a lot of time developing, describing, deepening the understanding of one's own coaching philosophy. This is something really exciting that I like to spend time on. Now, subcompetency number 3.2, where it says this now explicitly includes stakeholder and client commitment. In the past, it just says responsibility of the client and relevant stakeholders, but now including commitment towards coaching goals. I like this idea of commitment because commitment, it's another word for accountability. Commitment is another word for how the will of the client. It's not just a way forward, it's not just a way ahead, but the willingness of the client. You see, I can design very beautiful actions. It sounds right, it sounds logical, it sounds rational, but if I'm not committed to those, if I don't have the will, if I don't have that push to achieve those commitments, how do I know that I'm on track towards those commitments? So it's important for us to realize this, that it's not just designing beautiful actions, but our clients committed, holding themselves accountable towards those goals. In subcompetency 311, it says this: partners with client to close the coaching relationship in a way that respects the client and the coaching experience. So I like the idea of respects the client. Previously, it was the word honor. In the Asian culture, I like the word honor because honor, it's a different nuance than respect. In fact, when I say I honor you, I really give you the fullness of honor, the fullness of respect, the fullness of appreciation for you being you here in this moment. So when I say I honor you, it means that you are at the forefront. You have my respect. And I will take into consideration everything that will support you to be the best version of you. So in the Asian culture, the word honor, it's all encompassing. It's Very difficult to describe in words. Very much like in the Western world, we want to find definition of every single thing. But in the Eastern world, or where in many Asian societies and cultures, there is no one fixed definition. Many times when you ask them, they will tell you stories because sometimes words are not enough to describe the all encompassing nuance and essence of life. And this word, honor and respect, which I love. And there's also a new introduction. 3.12, it says this: revisits the coaching agreement when necessary to ensure the coaching approach is meeting the client's needs. So there's this like revisiting. And I love that this is included now because sometimes, we may be going through the fifth session, seventh session, and we realize the client has 12, 20 sessions with us. But are we revisiting enough the session agreements to make sure that we are truly supporting the client? And is this really helping the client towards where they want to be? So there's something for us to think about. Now, some of the things that we can do daily in terms of our daily coaching is to clarify coaching versus other roles, including what philosophy is. What's the difference between philosophy, approach, models, frameworks, tools, techniques? Are there differences? Are they the same? And this is something when I teach coaches and organizations all around the world to be clear on the distinctions between philosophy, approaches, methods, models, tools, frameworks, because this will ensure clarity of thought and approach in engagement with all clients. Also, think about the alignment of session agreements with the client's immediate needs. How are we aligning the session agreements with the client's immediate needs? Or are we just describing a certain agreement without taking the client's needs into thought? Another thing to think about is the revisitation and adaptation of agreements. Sometimes midway through the engagement or even in midway through the conversation to check in with the client to see whether are we on track, off track, or maybe perhaps we need to make some adjustments to those agreements and respect closure. So how do we end the session that celebrates, acknowledges, respects the growth and process of the client? When done well, competency three, it's that you have clarity at the start. There'll be less confusion. There's less confusion between, this is beyond the scope of coaching, you're entering therapy space, you're entering counseling space, or I'm lost in the logistics or confidentiality issues, or administrative issues, or goals issues. So having the clarity at the start is important. So clarity at the start is so critical to successful trust building in the whole coaching engagement. And agreements revisited when shifts arrives. When the client experiences shifts, sometimes what they thought that they want has now been changed because now they realize initially that's what they thought they want, but now, hey, that's perhaps not what I want. I have something else. I have some greater clarity about what I really, really want. So there's a shift that's happening. Also, client feels ownership, agreements co-authored and not imposed. Client has to take ownership of what they want. Agreements are co-created, co-authored, and I'm not imposing my agreement on the client. It's what the client wants. So what is it that you want to focus on today? Or what is it? What is an outcome that you want from this session? And that closure that honors the experience and the journey of the client. And I often say this in all my coaching engagement. Coaching, it's not a concept to be taught, but an experience to be experienced. And that is something so critical. So one example is this, like midway through the engagement, client pivots their goals, maybe have some new ideas that they want to go. Coach revisits and adapts the agreements with partnership. Yeah. So this is what I often say. Agreements are not signatures on paper. They are shared breaths of commitment. It's your commitment and my commitment to enter into this space. Some of the common struggles would be assumptions replace clarity. The coach presumes the agenda. The coach presumes that they know what the client wants without clarity. So the coach asks the questions, immediately goes into it. Or the coach asks the questions, they assume that that's what the client wants and just dive in without checking in, without clarifying. Or rigid agreements where coach avoids adapting to the client, or role confusions, unclear distinctions between the role of a coach, advisor, therapist, mentor, facilitator, or poor closure, ending without acknowledgement of growth. There's something to think about as well. Are we acknowledging the growth? For example, a coach continues with original plan despite client change circumstances. Session feels irrelevant And sometimes the client feels, hey, you know what? I don't feel I'm getting any value from the session. And that's because the client has some change. There's a new change, there's a new shift in direction. And that's when we need to check back with the client. So this is something I often see. When agreements harden into walls, partnership suffocates. Remember, coaching is a co-creation process or a co-creative process, not one where the coach is above the client. We are not on equal grounds. So take time to review the coaching agreements. What agreements means to you today?